There's something that drives logo designers insane. It's branding ourselves. Despite having a profession in which we design countless logos for clients, when it comes to making a logo for ourselves, many people hit some sort of bizarre mental block. You'd think that it would be easier for us to design a logo for ourselves since there's no one else that knows us better, but this is often not the case. It's not uncommon for a logo designer to spend months or even years striving to design a logo for themselves which they may find even half acceptable. In many cases, people just make do with a logo they aren't even happy with, just for the sake of conducting business. This phenomenon, which is so real, even prompts logo designers to hire other logo designers to design a logo for them. I've been stuck in this cycle for a number of years, though I've been resilient in hiring another logo designer. It's important for me as a logo designer, who's ironically teaching the subject, to branch off from my established corporate image, and so I need a fresh, vibrant logo to represent me. The logo needs to appear personal, inviting and friendly. Just recently I put pencil to paper using my trusted grid pad, and lo and behold, after a venture lasting years, I've finally reached a logo design solution that I'm happy with. And so I'm going to reveal it together with a summary of the process. Being inspired by a range of simplistic logos consisting of geometrical shapes, and being a fan of cubism, I began to experiment. Taking advantage of the grid using a 4x4 square for each letter, I focused upon the name Dan in uppercase characters, which is obviously an abbreviation for my name. In the second sketch, I realised that the capital A could be simplified into a triangle and still retain legibility. In the next instances beneath, I realised that this triangle shape could be fashioned into the tip of a pencil, with a gap to separate the wood and lead portions. Naturally, the pencil represents the designer's sketching process. A pencil is a very common symbol amongst designer logos, so at this stage I wasn't confident that it was something original, but I pressed on to see what the other characters could offer. Next, I went on to simplify the N by first drawing a square. I then introduced a gap on the diagonal to make a figurative character consisting of two triangles. Thankfully, against the other shapes, this held legible as the letter N. I then realised that the characters could be rearranged to form a pencil shape. The pencil tip could be rotated 90 degrees to the left and placed first. The N shape could be placed in the centre as the pencil shaft. And finally, the D shape could be placed at the end. Following this realisation, I then discovered that the D could be the eraser of the pencil. With that in mind, I then divided the D shape so that the rectangle portion represented the ferrule, the metal band between the shaft and the eraser. With that, the concept was born. The last sketches on the page show the word Dan, which can be transformed magically into a pencil. I created a logo design puzzle. I can use the two interchangeably as static images on various medium, and there's an abundance of potential for an animation sequence boosting the transformation. So as always, although I'm working with primitive shapes, I developed a refinement sketch on dot paper. This is an A4 pad, so it gave me more space to work within, and the dots rather than the lines allowed me to see the sketch more clearly whilst having a subtle guide for measure. I translated the 4x4 squares onto this pad with a 10x10 square per character. I established the rule that the rectangle of the D and the tip of the triangle would each share the same 3 square measure. Gaps throughout would be 2 squares thickness. This included the vertical gap in the D, the gap between the point and triangle base, and the diagonal of the N. So with this refinement sketch complete, it was time to head over into Adobe Illustrator to digitize the design. Here we have the refined sketch placed onto the canvas. I'm going to redevelop the 10x10 grid which I have on paper. I'm going to first test out how the design looks when it's bound to strict mathematical rule, and then I'm going to do whatever I choose until it looks good to the eye, since that's the most important thing. I've got 3 layers set up, one for the sketch, one for the grid, and one for the logo graphic, with sketch and grid layers locked. So now I'm working on the D shape, pulling out that rectangle to 3 squares thickness, then pulling out a circle using the ellipse tool, starting at the top left of the grid and ending at the bottom right to make things perfect, before halving it at the central point. This leaves the 2 square gap. Unlocking and copying across 2 more 10x10 grids, I'm now using the pen tool to draw a triangle, starting at bottom left and clicking 5 squares in central at the top, before clicking bottom right and closing the shape at the left. Again, using the grid as a measure, I'm pulling out a rectangle 2 squares thickness and deducting that using minus front to form the gap. For the N, I'm pulling out a simple square covering the whole 10x10 area, holding shift to keep its ratio. Using the 2 square gap in the triangle as a measure to make a guide, I form a rectangle rotated 45 degrees clockwise. I then ensure that the central point of top and bottom of the rectangle are dead on the corners. With that done, that's the logo on paper, digitized. Already I can see that this could look so much better, so I'm breaking free from the mathematics and I'm reducing the size of those gaps since they look far too big. First, I'm extending the rectangle towards the right in the D shape to make the gap smaller to my liking. Then I'm using the rectangle to make a guide. After redrawing the triangle, I'm using the guide and deducting it from the shape again to leave the gap. And I'm pulling out a square and repeating the same process for the N, deducting the guide on the diagonal. Due to the point of the triangle lacking surface area, I'm counteracting the optical illusion which is present. It appears that the shape doesn't meet the height of the D and the N at the top, and so I'm overcompensating by making it taller, using the green rectangle as a means to measure. The official term for this is called overshooting. Now, coming to the colours which I've pre-selected, we have a grey in the D to represent the metal, a pink for the eraser, a yellow for the wood of the pencil point of the A grey for the lead, and the 2 shades of blue for the N, which is to be the pencil body. One blue is darker to depict shadow on the underside of the pencil. With the colours assigned, it's time to assemble a puzzle. Entering outline mode for precision, I can use the same universal gap size to dictate the spacing between each shape of the pencil. With a very slight adjustment to the pencil point, rotating it to ensure that it still functions when it's upright, the mission approaches closure. The shapes appearing as building blocks assures the student that a simple, thoughtful design approach can render a project child's play. And with that, my personal logo design is complete. Finally.